I'm Diablo Cody, the writer of Jennifer's Body.
I'm Megan Fox, and I played Jennifer Check in Jennifer's Body.
And we're just here to talk about the film 10 years after its release.
Why don't you just come by my place?
That was random.
This isn't really your house, is it?
We can play mommy and daddy.
No way.
Something that people actually do ask me about a lot, and I don't ever have the answers for, is like the inception of this project. So I have a specific question of my own, but just in general for you, how did it start and how did I get involved in this movie? And Amanda and everyone else.
Well, okay, so I specifically, my entire life had dreamed of writing a horror movie. I'm a huge horror fan, and I had, at the time that I wrote Jennifer's Body, I'd only done one feature at that point. I had written Juno, which is not a horror movie, unless you think Unwanted Pregnancy is a horror, which I guess it kind of is.
I know a few of those people.
Yeah, so for me it was just the fulfillment of a dream, and Juno had been a successful movie, so coming off of that, I was sort of given carte blanche to write anything that I wanted. And it's very rare for a screenwriter to have that kind of creative freedom, and indeed I have not enjoyed that level of creative freedom since. So I just thought, all right, this is it. Like, I'm going to write my crazy gonzo horror movie, and I want it to be female-focused. I want it to be about a female friendship, and I specifically want it to be about a girl who eats boys. I want it to be about, like, cannibalism and about sex and empowerment and revenge and all that stuff, and I knew what I wanted. And so I wrote the script, and that was, if I recall correctly, a very free-flowing and exciting and easy process. And I think I was aware of how bizarre it was. Like, right off the bat, I was like, this is not a super commercial movie. Mm-hmm. But I was lucky enough to get Karin Kusama attached to direct, and then the big question became, who's going to play Jennifer? And honestly, everybody else, like, for instance, the character Needy, like, we read a lot of people, and we talked to a lot of actresses. I remember sitting down with, like, Emma Stone, and, like, but before we realized that Amanda Seyfried was clearly perfect for the part. But Jennifer, we always knew that was you. There was no question about it. I'm sure you remember being approached, like, early on in the process.
Yeah. What was it about me that made you think that I could play a psychopath that devours boys?
Do you know what it was? I think, and this is a compliment,
Okay.
you have mystique, which not a lot of, particularly now in this era of social media and people being completely accessible, it's rare. And old movie stars had mystique. It was hard to imagine, for instance, you know what, I'm not going to name names. I will just say many of the actresses in your cohort, I could not imagine playing Jennifer, because they did not have the sort of self-possessed Ava Gardner type quality that you have. And we just knew. We had seen Transformers. You're laughing. Yeah. Is that your favorite subject?
Oh, I don't mind. I actually don't mind talking about it anymore. I've come full circle with that.
I'm the same way with stuff.
Yeah, I've been on a total journey with that, and I've made it back to a place where nothing that I've experienced is a bad thing. It was always something that grew me in the right direction to where I am now. So I don't hate. Do you hate talking about something because people associate it with you so much they're like, oh, I'm tired of talking about it, or because you had a bad experience?
Well, I have to say there was an era I make it sound like it was 100 years. There was a time when it was painful for me to talk about Jennifer's Body because, that movie was a commercial failure.
Yeah. And, like,
I was savaged personally. It wasn't just having a professional failure. And so it was hard, and I had written about it a lot, and I had talked about, I've actually gone through therapy because of that experience. And now, 10 years later, I genuinely love talking about it. I'm so happy to be here talking with you about it. But I think part of that is because we're being validated now.
Yeah.
People the movie has suddenly found its audience.
Yeah.
Are you PMSing or something? PMS isn't real, Needy. It was invented by the boy-run media to make us seem crazy.
Did you feel like you were being savaged by critics personally? Or you felt like other people in the industry were coming after you? Or where did you feel the attack was coming for you during that process?
I felt like people in the industry definitely were coming for me. If you recall, the movie came out in, like, the early days of Twitter. And
I've never...
You're not, like, a social media person.
But kind of vaguely, maybe.
People are very careful with their tweets these days, but back then it was Twitter was a new social media platform, and people were like reckless. So I would like search my name, which is idiotic. I don't do that. I do not do that stuff anymore.
Okay.
And I would see like actual peers of mine, like other writers and other directors making fun of me and making fun of the movie, I guess assuming I wouldn't see the tweet.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh my God, like I'm being attacked from the inside. Like I'm, and critics were awful.
But
like,
for me, what was surprising was I felt like they didn't actually watch the movie. Like, how could they review it the way that they did after having watched the movie? I do feel like obviously it was mismarketed, and I think that's you probably feel a lot of anger about that, right? Or you did at the time, because it was marketed in a way, that it didn't really give it much of a chance. But it's their job to be impartial and be neutral and to watch a movie and review it that way, and that's obviously not what happened. Because, and I don't like anything that I do, but even I, after seeing the movie, was like, this is a great, great movie. I expected to get on. That's what was always happening, and I figured was going to continue to happen. But I was surprised that the movie itself wasn't given more respect. But it has grown like year after year after year. It's growing this. I don't even know if can it even be considered a cult following at this point. I feel like it's broken through where it's just a lot of people are obsessed with this movie.
They truly are. I hear more about this movie than any other project I've worked on. If I get randomly stopped in the grocery store, which is strange enough for a writer. That doesn't happen to a lot of screenwriters, so I feel very fortunate. If somebody stops me, it's always some like 22-year-old who wants to talk to me about Jennifer's Body, and to me that is the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't even think you could have legally seen this movie when it came out and you found it.
Don't be so TV needy. They're just boys. Morsels. We have all the power. Don't you know that these these are like smart bombs, okay? You point them in the right direction and it gets real.
Can you talk about, because obviously I wasn't in on like the audience testing and the screens and the testing for the publicity and the marketing and all of that. What was that like? Because obviously something went in a very wrong direction, and where was that coming from?
Well, the test screenings were horrible. And I believe that's because of the audiences that were recruited for the screenings.
Which were like frat boys?
Exactly. The studio had a very strong, unshakable belief that this movie needed to be marketed to young men, specifically. So that was who they...
Which came because of me, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I got a very memorable email from a marketing person at the studio once, where I had sent him this articulate defense of the film, and here's how it should be marketed. And I said, what specifically are you thinking? And he wrote back, Megan Fox hot, 3 words.
For cutting a trailer together?
That
or just
was
for marketing
in terms
in
of
general? In
terms of what is the value of this film.
Okay.
So that should give you an idea of where they were going with it.
Somebody was mentioning that at a test screening or you had a test group and somebody was like, it needs more boobs.
I still have the card. So there was a test screening that a kid wrote. They said, what would you improve about this film? And the kid wrote, needs more boobs, and spelled boobs BEWBS. And that was the data that was collected and taken seriously by the people who were marketing the movie. So your experience, I feel like I am not a performer, and I feel like it must be a tremendous amount of pressure to be sort of centered on this poster, or to be you're the face of the film, and people are savaging it.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get too heavy, but like,
no.
Is it difficult for you, or are you thicker skinned because of the profession that you're in?
No, I'm actually incredibly sensitive, and there was so much going on with me at that time that just that movie being picked apart wasn't at the top of my. That I was getting bullied from all angles, and it wasn't that in particular was hurtful. It was, but there was so much happening between the release of this movie, something very unfortunate was going on for me publicity-wise when I was promoting this movie, and then some other things happened after that, and I was dealing with a tremendous amount of negativity, and I wasn't on social media or anything like that, but it was just constantly in the tabloids or on celebrity blogs, like back when Perez Hilton was like the website that everybody went to. Do you remember when I got photographed swimming in the lake and I was horrified? And I begged Dan Dubecki to call Perez Hilton and not post those photos because I was just destroyed over that. I was so wrecked over that. But anyway, it was in that time before I was getting any sort of social media feedback, which I'm not getting it now anyway because I don't check it. But it was expected, I guess I would say, because I had such a fraught relationship just with the public and with the media and with journalists, and I was struggling so much at that time in general that this didn't stand out as like a particularly painful moment. It just was a part of the mix. But it's overwhelming because what was happening there, and you must have been taken aback by like how sexualized I was and how I was like reduced to, I mean, objectified is like, it's not the right word. It doesn't capture what was happening to me at the time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just with that movie. It was with every producer I worked with. So that was it preceded a breaking point for me where you said you had to go into therapy. I had, I think, a genuine psychological breakdown probably where I wanted just nothing to do. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to have to take a photo. I didn't want to have to do a magazine. I didn't want to have to walk a carpet. I didn't want to have to be seen in public at all because the fear and the belief, the absolute certainty that I believed that I was going to be mocked or spat at, or someone would yell at me, or people would stone me or savage me for just being out and being whatever. I didn't look perfect. I was too fat. I was too thin. I was stupid. I was offensive. I was a waste of space. I was a bad actress. Whatever. Well, all of the things you can think of. I anticipated experiencing that because my belief system was, from what I had experienced, that the world wasn't going to accept me. And so I just went through a very dark moment after that. We must have been going through it at the same time and we didn't know. It wasn't because of this in particular, but this added to it, of course. But just I feel like, you know, I was sort of out in front of the Me Too movement before the Me Too movement happened. Like I was speaking out and saying, you know, hey, these things are happening to me and they're not okay. And everyone was like, oh, we don't care. You deserve it because of how you talk, because of how you look, because of how you dress, because of the jokes you make.
That's why you haven't really heard a lot from me on that subject, even though I have a lot to say. Yeah. Because to be honest, I'm still terrified people will say, well, she was a stripper.
Right.
We don't really care what she, like, does she really have a right to talk about being sexually objectified or having been put through in Hollywood? Because, like, she, you know, made that choice for herself. Yeah. And her story is not valid. Agreed. So I'm scared.
Yeah. I felt the same way. I felt like, you know, we live in this moment right now where you believe victims, but if there's ever going to be one person that it was okay not to believe, it would be me. If it's ever going to be okay to shame a victim, it's going to be me. That's just the belief because of what I've been through. And that's not to say that it's right, but it is a fear. It's the same fear that you're expressing. And not that I need to speak out so that I can have some sort of healing, but just the fact that we struggle with that privately is unfortunate because there's still not really a space. Like, I don't feel like there's a space in feminism for me, you know? Even though I consider myself a feminist, I feel like feminists don't want me to be a part of their group. And what are we talking about then? Yeah. What is feminism? What is supporting other females if there's only certain ones of us you support? If I have to be an academic or I have to be not threatening to you in some way, why can't I be a part of the group as well? Why do I have to be dismissed? Because of what? And now especially, what did I ever really do that was so provocative or so bad?
Nothing. That's why it's mystifying to me.
Considering all the stuff that's happened since then and what's happening on a regular basis in this country and with celebrities that we have every day, I never really did anything that crazy, but I was really dragged through the coals for a lot of it. I'm very permeable and I'm very sensitive, and so I don't show that. I'm not stoic, that's not the right word. People think I'm standoffish, but it's usually because I have to be. I'm trying to put up a wall so I don't absorb everything you're feeling and he's feeling and this person is feeling and take it with me. And that energy was sort of penetrating me at that time in my life, and I definitely brought that to set and offset, and just in general, I was living that for a minute, and that made me wonder if you had somebody specifically you were inspired by.
What I was really basing it on was myself, because I was going through this transition in my own life where I really am in real life, if we're going to use Jennifer's Body characters as a metaphor, I'm a needy, okay? Like I am a bookish, insecure, cowardly person. And I had created, and my real name is Brooke, and I had created this Diablo Cody persona to survive and to get attention, which is something that I desperately needed at that time in my life, because nobody ever listened to me. And then suddenly when I changed my name and started doing uncharacteristic things, suddenly for the very first time in my life, people were interested. You know, I've never experienced fame on your level, nothing even remotely close. But I was suddenly like a public figure, which is unusual for a writer. And I was like chasing the dragon in a way. Like when you get used to that level of attention and you want more of it, even though you know it's toxic and you know it's not really who you are. And luckily, like right after the movie came out and flopped, I was able to like pull the ripcord and I got pregnant. Like it was not a coincidence that the movie came out and I got pregnant like a month later, because I was like, I'm done. Like I don't like, I need a different identity now. This is bad news. Like I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be Brooke, and I'm going to go, and I'm not going to go to red carpets, and I'm not going to go to events. And I just didn't want to be any type of public figure anymore. So I just made that decision, which I don't regret. Like I've gotten better every day since then.
Yeah.
But it was definitely like a sort of autobiographical for me writing that movie. And no one has ever actually asked me that. So it feels cathartic to talk about.
Was Jennifer then the projection of your alter ego then? Needy and Jennifer were Brooke and Diablo.
Exactly. Yeah, because Needy is the person who's looking around going, this is all really messed up. Like this isn't okay. And Jennifer's flicking the lighter on her tongue, which I love that's become a very popular, iconic GIF that I get sent all the time.
Yeah.
But like, who knew? So one thing that people have asked me about recently is Me Too, and the way that this, like perhaps this film is finding more of a sympathetic audience now because it is dealing with themes of like consent, assault, like male abuse of power.
What I had specifically in talking about all of this more recently was I realized that in filming that scene where they sacrifice me, that for me, that was really reflective of, I felt like my relationship with the movie studios at that point. Because I felt like that's what they were willing to do, to literally bleed me dry. They didn't care about my health, my well-being, mentally, emotionally, physically at all. And they were willing to sacrifice me physically as long as they got what they wanted out of it. And it didn't matter how many times I spoke up and said, I'm hurting, this isn't right, I need someone to protect me, this is going on, someone needs to listen. It didn't matter at all. And so in that moment, they kind of were a representation of what I was dealing with that way. But a lot of people love that band, that fictional band that you created. That's become iconic on its own, which is really interesting. And I see people dressed as Jennifer for Halloween. I see people dressed as Adam's character.
She can fly.
She's just hovering. It's not that impressive. God, do you have to undermine everything that I do? You are such a player hater.
You're a jerk. Wow, nice insult, Hannah Montana.
So my 6-year-old, he's almost 7. He was he? Yeah, he was 6 last year. He was a zombie cheerleader. He hasn't seen the movie. My son's super creative, and so like he likes to design clothes, and sometimes he wears dresses, and he's like a little fashion designer or like a mad painter. He's like a Van Gogh. He's like a crazy maniac for art. But he wanted to, I don't know why he wanted to be a zombie cheerleader. That's just, he came up with that on his own. And when he chose that, I said, I kind of played a character like that in a movie before. They still don't really understand what that means, that I'm in a movie, but it isn't real.
Yeah.
Because they think that whatever's happening, I actually experienced. And I made the mistake, and I don't know why I did this. He wanted to see how she becomes a zombie.
Yes.
So I show him the scene in the woods where they're going to sacrifice me. He's so sensitive. I don't know why I did that. He was hysterical, and he talks about it still. It's been almost a year because he doesn't understand. And I was like, look at me. I'm right here.
Yeah.
I'm laughing. It's okay. That's not mommy.
Pretend.
I was pretending. The way you fake cry when you want something, I was faking. It's not. But I think it's too much for any child to see. But also I think he was, because that scene was intense for me, and I forgot where I went with it. And he's the crying and the pain was genuine in that moment, and I think he feels that. Obviously they're connected to us, you understand.
Yeah.
They're connected to our energy, and so he had a hard time with that. But I know that when he's a little bit older, he's going to be he's going to be a big Jennifer's Body fan. And I expect to see him as Jennifer Check for Halloween at some point in the near future.
I mean, that's the coolest thing ever.
It is really cool. And you know, when you're making, I don't know what you were thinking when you were making the movie. I never make a movie and I'm like, this is going to be iconic. Like, I'm never thinking that
never.
when I'm on set making a movie. So it's funny when that happens in retrospect. It ends up happening now, 10 years later. I look up and I'm like, God, that was a really fun character. That was a really special movie.
It's funny that you say that you don't expect things to become iconic. I was specifically pessimistic because I cared so much about the movie and because it was so personal, so specific, and so weird. I knew the movie was not going to be successful. And I feel terrible saying that, but I just thought to myself, like, I did not write this to conform to any model of films that succeed.
MoveOn.org, needy. It's over. Life is too short to be moping around about some white trash pig roast. That's sweet, Jen.
Do you think, though, looking back, that just for you personally, maybe that was a blessing? Because had you continued on that same trajectory of being in a vicious cycle with attention and with fame, had that movie been very successful, it would have propelled you even further into the ether, and you may have floated away and never come back. And maybe you would never have been a mother, or not the kind of mother that you are now.
Yes, it is a blessing. And it was also a character building experience that made me a better writer. Because I think if everything you do is successful, in general, you become complacent and you start to believe your own hype. And for me, it was, especially at that time in my life, I needed to have the bubble burst.
Yeah.
So it was actually, it worked out.
Yeah.
I wish it hadn't cost people, but
But what did it cost them, really? Because yes, it costs, you mean people lost money investing in the movie and
or they lost opportunities. You think about that. It's that's the thing about writing a movies or a TV series, is you feel like the godmother of the project in a way. And you feel like there are sort of hundreds of people depending on you for it to succeed. And I try to put that out of my mind because it's crippling. It is a thought you have. You're like, a lot of lives are riding on this idea.
Yeah. But it's also a matter of perspective. Like, when somebody feels like they've lost something in terms of that experience, because I drink tea every morning, and sometimes my tea has little special sayings and mantras on it, and one of them that I like is, the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment. And that's the truth. Sometimes we look at things because we have a specific map of how we're going to get to this goal and what our future is supposed to look like, and when something doesn't happen, we consider it a failure, or we consider that we've lost something and that we're suffering and that the universe is against us. But the opposite is true. The universe is always conspiring on our behalf to weave everything together for good, but you just have to shift your perspective. So at that time, I felt like I was suffering, but now having a different outlook, having grown the way that I've grown, it made me a much better human being. We were sort of in a parallel in some way, even though we seem so different. I was feeling and going through a lot of the same things you were feeling and going through. And when you say, like, you were living a character that wasn't you, and you were addicted to the character, but you also didn't know how to get out of the character, even though it was toxic and painful, that was absolutely what I was living at the time. And I think it took...
And you were being made to play that character, which I think is even more traumatic, to be shoehorned into that.
I was pushed into it,
yes.
But then I can't totally play a victim because I took over and I was like, if this is what it is, it's what it is. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it full force. But it was not genuine. And that's you're never going to thrive when you're being disingenuous to yourself. And I think it took getting pregnant. That was the first real breakthrough where my consciousness shifted and my mind opened up. And I was able to see from a bird's eye view and breathe and take it in and have a different perspective. And then another kid and then another kid. And with every kid, I feel like that's always been the doorway into a better version of myself, because they're the mirrors that show you your shadow. You have to look at it and go, this is who I am, and I have to acknowledge that, and I have to grow, and I have to change it.
You need a manny bad. You should find a Chinese chick to buff your situation.
Also, I don't know if you get this, I get this all the time. People will be like, you just don't really work that much. Like, journalists will be like, it's nice to see you in a movie because you don't really work that much. And it's like, I've gestated and given birth to 3 children. I starred in a movie that opened worldwide #1 twice. I was on a critically acclaimed sitcom. I executive produced and created a show about archaeological controversies. How much more productive does a woman need to be? You. And I'm in an industry that treats pregnancy like leprosy, so it's not like I can keep working once I'm past 5 months. I have to just do nothing. It is what it is, and that's so frustrating for me, because it's like when you're in Oscar realm, or when you're in this like huge blockbuster place and you're a pinup or whatever you want to call me, it's like everything you do after that needs to be on the same level.
Right, because you've had a moment of ubiquity.
Or you're failing.
Yes.
And it doesn't work that way. How about cut us a break, especially as women who are creating life as well as working. You can't expect me to be putting out the same kind of things at the same kind of pace, which I was never really an ambitious overworker, but as when I was a kid and had no children and wasn't married and had a different life. So for me, that's really annoying and very frustrating, because it's like, how can you start off here, which we both did. Yeah. And so then if your next project is here, which is still miles above where most people ever make it, you're still
Well, I knew I was from the beginning, because I won an Oscar for my first screenplay.
Yeah.
So everybody says, "Oh, how many are you going to win?" I was like, "1." Like, this is it. You really think I'm going to win another Oscar? Like, that doesn't happen to people. I'm thrilled to have one. I look at it every day, but I've never been in a place where I think to myself, like, okay, I need to sustain that level of success, because how could you? Yeah. And also, like, I had 3 kids. Yeah. And it's a miracle that I'm here. Mm-hmm. Like, being able to sit here and discuss this with you is an achievement for me, because I got 3 kids, out of the house this morning. Mm-hmm. And I'm tired. Mm-hmm.
I think people don't, it's, in my experience at least, being a mother is not something that's really respected in this industry. If anything, it's considered like kind of
not in the least,
It's a handicap.
It is.
Having to leave to go work all the time, which I'm sure you do also, it's hard when you have little kids. Even if you're staying in town but you're going to work, or what I do traveling far away, your mind is always somewhere else as well, because your heart is always somewhere else. You're always worried about what's going on with them and the guilt of having left them, and are you doing the right thing, and then struggling with, well, what do I need to do for me, for my creativity, and who am I outside of just being a mother, because that's not my only identity. Yeah. It's very complicated, and people don't give enough credit to people who are dealing with that, because it's not easy. It weighs on you, the constant, like, every room I walk into, I look for everything that could possibly go wrong. If there's an earthquake, what's going to fall off of the wall? If we're in a movie theater, how are we going to get out of here if an active shooter
terrible
comes
that
in?
We have to think about that now, but I do too.
But it's constant, and it's so draining, and nobody talks about that. The preoccupation with the child's safety, and just get through this day and don't choke on a piece of food, please. Like, just that. Just don't choke. Don't struggle for me to worry about all 3 kids. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah, no, they don't, and it really is draining.
After I had one of my sons, I had to go do reshoots. They called me. I gave birth. They called me to do reshoots 2 weeks afterwards. They were like, "Is she ready to do reshoots?" And I was like, "No, a person just came out of my vagina. I'm not ready to go do reshoots. What are you talking about?" So they were graceful and gracious, and they gave me, like, I think I went back 4 or 5 weeks later. I think it was 4 weeks later. And trying to negotiate being allowed to go to my trailer to breastfeed my baby was almost impossible, because you have to breastfeed every 2.5 or 3 hours depending on what schedule you're breastfeeding on. Almost impossible, because they don't understand. You know what it is on set. If you take 2 minutes away, it's like everybody's super stressed out about every moment that goes by, because the time is money. Yeah. And so my point is, it's a hostile environment for new mothers, or any mothers in general. A lot of people have stopped me and begged for this movie to be turned into a series or a show, or to be reborn somehow. Yes. So I'm assuming you've been asked the same thing. And what do you think about that?
So here's what's interesting. Like, maybe 5 years ago, I really wanted to try and do Jennifer's Body as a TV series. And there was so little interest that I couldn't even get to the pitch stage. Like, people didn't even want to hear the pitch. Yeah. And the argument that I kept making, as I said, because they said, why would anyone make a television show about a movie that did not succeed? And I said, have you heard of Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Mm-hmm. That movie was not well received, and then went on to become this incredibly inspired series that was a huge hit. So I said, this would be the exact same thing. Like at least hear the pitch and nobody would. So, and then now all of a sudden I'm getting calls about it. Mm-hmm. People are very interested in doing something like that.
You're just jello because you're not invited.
Jealous? That place is disgusting. Everyone in there has a mustache.
You're totally jello. You're lime green jello, and you can't even admit it to yourself.
Would there be any fear of not doing justice to the original?
Yeah, there would be some fear there, and at the same time, I do think that I feel so connected on like just a really deep primal level to this project. I think I know what's right for this baby, and I don't think I would screw it up.
I get asked about it all the time. I mean, I died in the movie, so I don't know.
Yeah, but it's magical. You could be back.
True. I would be back. I mean, I loved it. It's my favorite thing I've ever done.
I did not know that, and I'm happy to hear it.
Really?
Yeah.
What would you think my favorite thing would be that I've done? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Perhaps.
Jonah Hex?
I don't know.
You want to talk about a movie? Whenever you're feeling bad about yourself, go read some Jonah Hex reviews. That'll make you feel better.
You should be happy for me because I am having the best day since, like, Jesus invented the calendar.
Jesus didn't invent the calendar.
Whatever.
I get people coming up and quoting at me all the time.
You know what? See, so this doesn't really happen to me because, I'm a little underground as a writer. What do people say to you?
It smells like Thai food in here.
It smells like Thai food in here. Have you guys been...
That's my favorite quote.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm thrilled to hear that people are quoting that.
That's one of the ones that I think has lived forever. I hear that one the most. I don't think I have a favorite quote. I mean, that line was really fun to deliver.
And deliver it you did. You delivered like Domino's, baby. I love it.
There were a lot of really fun things to say. You don't have a favorite thing that you wrote in the script?
I don't know if this is appreciated, but I love, because it speaks to what you've been talking about here in terms of how women are objectified when Jennifer has been stabbed and says, my tit, and Nady says, no, your heart.
My tit. No, your heart.
To me, it's like the audience is looking at her chest and seeing a tit, and what I'm trying to show them is her heart.
Nady and Chip had some great moments, too. I feel like classic.
Chip's asking her if he's too big. That's good. She's like having this demonic, like this moment where she's seeing a horrible vision and she starts screaming during sex. And Johnny Simmons says,
Am I too big?
Johnny Simmons was brilliant.
When I first saw it, I was so thrilled. I left the edit. I was overwhelmed. I was in tears. And Mason, our producer, was with me, and we were both so happy. So then when the movie was screened, we were knocked for a loop because
But what happened at the screening? People were like, we
oh my God.
hate it.
People eviscerated.
Did they not understand that it was a comedy? Were they disappointed it wasn't a straight horror movie? What were they upset about?
So they had recruited two types of people for the screening, is I'm gathering based on the data we received. People who were huge fans of Juno, which is not the same kind of movie, and many of whom were horrified and said, like, I came here to see a cute movie like Juno, and there is murder in this. It was like they were not even prepared to see a horror film. And then the other part of the audience was guys who wanted to see something very specific from you.
What age group were the guys?
I mean, if I had to guess, I would say they were 18 to 24.
Okay.
The coveted, precious white male 18 to 24 demographic was there. I do not recall seeing a lot of girls there at all.
You know what's funny is people assume, like they assumed, that most of my fan base is male, and it's not true. It's young girls.
Oh, I know that from looking at Instagram and Twitter and the posts that I get sent.
Yeah.
That it is women.
It's teenage, early 20s, like you said.
Yeah.
Females. So obviously the studio misread that as well and thought those people... But also, why give those people any sort of creative input into how a movie should be made or not made at all? Why do they do that at all? Why do they do those test screenings and ask who gives a what 18-year-old douche thinks?
Do you buy all your murder weapons at Home Depot?
God, you're much.
I got a call from my agent saying there's an opportunity for you to work on this movie that was written by Diablo Cody. She wrote Juno. Was I at the premiere of Juno?
You were, and I have a photo of the two of us together, and you do look like you were dragged.
I thought I was.
Premiere.
I remember I was wearing a Motley Crue T-shirt. I thought I was super cool at the time.
I mean, it was cool.
I was going through like I'm gonna be like grungy and rock, and I just don't have any of that in me at all. It was totally fake. But so I went to that. I don't know if I was signed on to do it yet. It was like in the process, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah, we were
which
like
came
about
first.
to, yes.
And
we were recording you.
I met, yeah, so we had to take a picture together on the red carpet. What's the point of that? Why do they make us do that? Why does it matter? Why would I sign on to a movie just because we walked a red carpet together? Or vice versa. Why would you want me in your movie because I came to the premiere of Juno? One has nothing to do with each other. It's so antiquated.
They just love that stuff.
They still do it. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. I think I read it. I don't even think I read it all the way through. I think I read it like 30 pages in and was like, I really want to do this movie because it was so... I don't feel like anybody else could have done it but me. And that's such a weird...
I agree.
That's such a... I'm not trying to...
No, I've said this many times. You've heard me say it.
I was in that space. I kind of was that person in a way. It was like the allegory of what was going on in my life. And so it was the perfect project for me at that moment. So I never questioned it.